Welcome back to Thames Debate, where we're discussing the common market and in particular the direct elections to be held in this country in June. In the first half of the programme, it was quite clear that there's a considerable philosophical gap between the candidates I have here. Let me start, however, with our two guests from Europe. Mr. Van Arsen, what do you think of the debate so far?
I learned a lot of this debate. Firstly, I would say I can't agree to this gentleman saying we must have a socialistic society in Europe. This will not be a socialistic, not a capitalistic society. This will be a pluralistic and open society for every idea in Europe, and we will have creativity and not bureaucracy in one way. Second point, I must say, my country, Germany, has a lot of win of this European common market. 50% of our exports are going to the Netherlands, to France, to Great Britain. And every worker is gaining and has a lot of income of these exports. They opened the borders for us, and so we are very happy with this European community, and we don't understand that there are fellows in Great Britain which try to withdraw from this European community and to get isolated from Europe. And I think this gentleman is absolutely right, saying this is a moral and psychological question, this direct elections. That is not a legal and a constitutional one in the first point, but it is a moral and psychological one. And it gets a very good impact for democracy in Europe.
Thank you very much. Mr. Dankert, can you understand why people here want to get out of the market?
Well, I understand in the first place that the channel is broader in political thinking than in real terms. I think Britain is part of the community, whether it's in or out. It does not make any bloody difference. Industrial policy, unemployment. Well, you can mention the whole lot, and the whole lot of problems actually facing the British government are part of community problems, and you can't detach. And discussions about in or out are absolutely useless discussion because you are functioning in a certain economic system, whether it's socialist or not. I agree it's not socialist. But that is because the socialists in Europe have not the majority. And then you can discuss whether that's good or not. We should strive for that majority. Mr. Van Arsen is against. I fully understand that. But to say because we have not a majority, we will not participate, I don't know whether next year in Britain there will be a socialist majority. Well, this kind of discussions are politically, I think, absolutely fruitless. One should discuss about what kind of policies one wants in Europe in specific fields. In steel, in unemployment and energy, and you can call whatever you want, even in fishing, if possible. Well, if you do that, you can find majorities, and you get not always satisfactory policies. But I think, and I also object a little bit to this, well, you have it in every political situation, this inter-party haggling, the Conservatives this and the Socialists that. I think the Conservatives should realize that they are not a European party. They present only the British Conservatives, and for the moment there is no further international relationship apart from one or two others, but that does not really count. The Labour Party has, of course, a considerable problem that it has to integrate from an island situation in a wider Europe.
Okay, I must stop you there. Mr. Cho, yes, quick point.
You completely misunderstood my position. We are not going into Europe in order to build a European Conservative Party, though that may happen. We are going there to press British interests in Europe. That is why we're there. And one cannot separate Britain's dismal showing at home from its dismal showing in Europe. The two go together. We couldn't expect a miracle in Europe when we've got...
No, I must bring Mr. Cobbold in, who never spoke in the first half. Mr. Cobbold, can we improve the Parliament? Can we make it work for Europe and for Britain?
Yes, I think we can. I think that the Labour Party are in fact deceiving the British people when they talk about the possibility of taking them out, because out of Europe, I don't believe we could stand on our own. I think Europe is all about...
We're not doing too well at the moment.
Europe is all about the employment opportunities of the 1980s. And in fact, I think we owe the next generation of people in this country an exciting new challenge where they're going to be able to work in a new dimension. I think this is something quite new, and I think what has been said by both parties here, from a liberal point of view, does not come over well, because it seems to me they are all concerned with a rather narrow British interest, whereas I think the important thing about Europe is the interest of the European people as a whole. And the Liberal Party, as you know, has been very much in favour, is the only party, in fact, in this country which has been consistently in favour of the European community. And it's also the only party which is fighting this election on a common manifesto with liberal democratic parties.
Specifics that can be done when we get there.
When we get there, I think that the first thing is to improve the democratic control over the institutions of the community to create a direct link between the peoples of Europe and the European Commission and the other institutions. I think we can certainly make progress on, for example, a very important area, the European monetary system. I think we can do a lot to encourage the national governments to get their monetary policies more in line so that we can move closer towards a common currency. Because personally, I believe that there is no real possibility of getting the European idea to the next stage until we have some form of common currency. And we believe that can be introduced gradually by means of a parallel currency, for example.
Cobbold, thank you very much. Mr. Curry, I'm coming to you, Mr. Curry. May I put a question to you as well? If we do all these things, do you, of necessity, also devalue Westminster?
No, you don't, because at the moment there are certain areas which completely escape from any form of democratic control. You cannot pretend that the volume of community business is so limited that Westminster can effectively get to grips with it. There is, if you like, a sort of democratic deficit in Europe at the moment. And the job of the Parliament is to fill that void, that democratic deficit. Now, when we're fighting this campaign, we've got to explain very carefully the limitations of our powers. We've been talking about capitalism and socialism here today. The European Parliament cannot impose capitalism or socialism on the continent. And if we go about saying, we will do that, we stand for the Europe of the workers, of a Europe of a CBI, whatever you like, there will come a reckoning. Because the electors will say after a while, well, you made these promises in the campaign. Have you fulfilled them? And it is very difficult to fight a campaign in which you're obliged to talk about influence rather than powers. Now, we owe a duty to the people who are going to vote to us to explain that we are a different sort of animal to the other parliaments. Now, it may be, in time, that there's some sort of a conflict. Personally, I do not believe that a little competition would be bad for Westminster. But let us hope that there's a sort of creative tension, if you like, between a Westminster Parliament in which people are elected specifically to defend British interests and a European Parliament in which people are elected to defend the interests of their own country, but at the same time to take a broader view, to be able to say, look, it so happens that the British interest in this case is a European interest.
Okay, thank you very much. No, Mr. Gresham, I will come to Mr. Gresham, please.
I think it's unfortunate that when it comes to talking about defending the British interest, that we've not really seen very much from the Conservative Party, or indeed the tattered remnant of what used to be the Liberal Party, about what the British interest should be identified as, or how we go about defending them. It's interesting that this evening we've spent most of our time discussing the Labour Party's manifesto, and I think that's indicative of the fact that Labour is the only party in Britain which has devoted a good deal of attention and thought to the problems of Europe and about how to cope with them, and about how to cope with them particularly from the point of view of people in Britain. I wonder if I could say just a word to our colleagues from the other European states represented here tonight. I think that a lot of our friends in Europe are perhaps unaware of the very deep misgivings that ordinary working people in Britain do feel about the effect of our membership of the common market.
Encouraged by the
We've certainly, no, I don't think we need to encourage people to notice what has happened to the price of dairy products. Well, you may have to encourage them, but I live in my constituency and I go shopping there every week, and I have the evidence facing me on the supermarket shelves and in the market.
We've been in the
And this is the sort of cost.
5 years
This
of
is the
Labour
sort
government.
of cost which we have
They're
incurred.
your food mountains. They're
Now,
not our
we
food
do
mountains.
know,
It's
we
not
do
only
know,
dairy products that have gone up.
we do
Everything
know that
else has gone up as well.
70%, we do know that 70% of the community's budget goes on subsidies for agriculture. We know that something like 28% goes in milk products, causing people to increase production of milk products at a time when the demand for milk products is fallen.
Okay,
with the result that we, the taxpayers, are paying civil servants to try and find out what should be done with a vast mountain of powdered milk. And we, the taxpayers, the ordinary people of Britain, are the people who are footing the bill for that kind of farce.
All right, thank you. No, let me take this point directly to Mr. Van Arsen. Mr. Van Arsen, are you aware, let us take it that this is a fact, are you aware that there is a hostility in this? When you come to this country, do you find a hostility to the market? Do you find that people don't feel that they're getting the benefits that perhaps you say that the German people are getting?
Yes, you have, I think, some misunderstandings. German people and Netherlands people, we are now doing it in the European Common Market 20, 25 years. England only 5 years. and you can't, you must understand the feelings of British people. And you must see that there are some troubles with agricultural policy. I understand that quite well, and we explain it to our German people. But we think this is a very small side of the problem. You must see the general problem of the next generation we are facing, you know, the European community.
Mrs. Gordon.
That's the main point.
Thank you.
I would
Gentlemen,
like,
if
these gentlemen assembled here would let me get a word in edgeways.
I will let you get a word in
Thank you,
edgeways,
Mr.
Mrs. Gordon.
Gardner. I would like to bring this argument right down to earth, to the way our membership of the economic community has affected people in their daily lives. The first thing we had was the introduction of VAT, indirect taxation, which hits hardest at the poorest people. It's 8% now. It is not on food and on fuel in England, but it's 20% in France. It is on more essential items in other countries, and we will fight for higher increases of VAT in the common market. Now, the common agricultural policy does have some benefits for French and German agriculture, but British agriculture, which is arguably the most efficient in the world, loses out on this. Gentleman here said that he goes shopping. I don't know how many of you do. I go shopping all the time. And I know when I'm in the supermarket at the meat counter, women are picking up pieces of meat, roasts that they want for a weekend, putting them back, picking, dithering, choosing, because they can't afford the food that they want for their families. And women have borne the brunt of it.
May I just make a point? I think in the remaining time we will not illuminate the world very much if we get into a clash about the common market agricultural policy or about the nitty-gritty of prices. And with that in mind, Mr. Jackson.
It is absolutely right that those people who are elected from this country to go and sit in the European Parliament will stand for British interests. And that will be true for the members from the other member states in the European Parliament.
Does it have to be
also is the European interest. And I would like to just say something about the European interest. We live in a very dangerous world. We, in this country, in Britain, are increasingly failing to notice how dangerous and difficult the world is. It took Harold Macmillan on the box the other day to remind us of the seriousness of the situation in the Middle East. All these things have been passing us by. The world is very dangerous. It is a difficult place. It's getting more difficult. And we need a strong and effective Europe, a Europe which is present in the field of politics, foreign policy and defence, and you will not get that unless you have the economic foundations for it. And that is what we're doing in Europe.
Yes, Mr. Balfe. Mr. Balfe.
This isn't Europe, this is a bit of Europe. And I'm not going to Europe to defend British interests. I will work with any socialist in Europe who will help to make life better for the working class of this country and of London. We live in a democracy. We keep on saying this. Well, the people who are electing me, the people who are electing me in this democracy are people who've had a rough deal. They're sending me there to work with any socialist in Europe to try and get a better deal. And that's the election is not to the Russian
Thank you all.
Which part of Europe do you want to join? We're talking about the European
All right, let
Parliament.
me take what you have said. Let me take what you have said directly to a European socialist. How do you think he's going to get on if he gets to Europe with that kind of attitude, Mr. Dancourt?
Well, on the last statement, I have not the slightest difficulty. I think if the British Labour Party members come with that attitude, that is what it is about. Because it is not a question of defending British interests. Because if everybody starts to defend his own interest, well, I don't know where we'll end up, not with the common market and certainly not with common policies.
But
it is all right, thank you. Let him make his point.
Perhaps you will be kind enough.
Please, Mr. Cobbold.
It is very well.
Let Mr. Dancourt speak, please.
It is very well possible, and it has been so in the past, also with anti-marketeers out of the Labour Party, that as soon as you start talking about concrete problems affecting our electorate, whether workers or old age pension or whatever, we can come to common positions. And if that would have been much more underlined in the Labour Party manifesto than in fact it has, I think all the squabbles we now have had
David
here
Curry.
about it.
David Curry.
Perhaps the gentleman would be kind enough to take his British colleagues on a guided tour of Europe and show them what happens there. You only have got to get off the boat in Calais and you can see the difference in the prosperity between this country and the rest of Europe. It screams out and hits you. because they are not inflicted with the scruffy little socialist republic which Mr. Callaghan is creating here. They have got intelligent regimes which permit the creation of wealth and regulate the intelligent use of wealth. And that is the difference between the community countries and Britain. And we must remember that Britain joined the common market at the very beginning of the worst recession that the Western world has seen since the war. Had we joined in 1970, we would all have been saying what a marvellous idea the thing was, because we hit the wave of prosperity, not the wave of recession.
Thank you. Mr. Horde and then Mr. O'Neill.
I think that this debate has been concerned with the negative attitudes of the Labour Party, and this has been the trouble with Britain. We're members of the community for the last 5 years, and what we in Britain have not seen is the positive approach which is so necessary. And that's what my party will be intending to bring forward. The people of this country badly need the opportunity to have a job of work, to be able to earn more and to have a better standard of living, to have a more secure Europe. The only way we're going to do this is by being positive, to give the people opportunity. All we see from the Labour Party in their manifesto is for them to have an opportunity of taking Britain out of the community. In no time do they talk about benefiting the people of this country so they can have more jobs and earn more, and for generally in this country to have a better standard of life.
Mr. O'Neill.
There's nothing
No, Mrs. Gordon. Mrs. Gordon, you asked me to let you in.
We really need to make clear where the policy differences lie, and I'll give you one example, and that is Labour wants to control multinationals, and it will do that by strengthening Westminster's control over them and strengthening control in Europe. And that's certainly. Let me finish. No, you must let me finish. That means controlling them in Europe. That means stopping things like Hoffmann-La Roche, fixing pharmaceutical prices. The man leaks the fact that there's a price fix going on. He is jailed by the Swiss police. Hoffmann-La Roche are fined by the European Commission. The man's wife commits suicide.
All right, let us
those are the issues that Labour is
please not bring it into personal specifics like that.
These are the issues that Labour
Mr. Mayhew.
I think we've had a fine old punch-up. But a nationalistic punch-up, mainly between the workers and the British interests here. And it does seem to me, certainly this isn't the thinking of the Liberals, though there was one Conservative candidate over there, I'm sorry, I don't know his name, who made the best Liberal statement on Europe that I think I've ever heard.
You can take nevertheless,
the fact is that we don't really take this kind of attitude at all. We are a European party, the Liberal Party. We are wholly dedicated to a common foreign policy, a common economic policy, and as Macmillan said, a common defence policy for Europe. We do not any longer think in these narrow class terms. We think it's ruining Britain, and it will ruin Europe if we do so.
All right, Mr. Lomas, please. Mr. Lomas.
Well, the thing is, the way some members have been talking tonight about the only way we can combat unemployment, the only way we can solve our economic problems is through membership of the common market, would lead us to think that we were just joining. In actual fact, it's been going for 20 years now.
But we haven't really joined yet.
It's got nearly 7 million unemployed, not only in this country, but in West Germany, in France, in Italy, and it clearly has no answer to these economic problems of the common market countries. And I want to turn just for a second, if I may. Someone said it's unrealistic to think about leaving the common market, that we'd be isolated. Well, Sweden, Finland, Austria, Switzerland, Norway, all doing very well, thank you very much, without being members of the common market. And the Labour Party manifesto, and I think this is the crucial difference between us on this issue, is that we say if after 5 years Parliament, or within a reasonable time, we cannot get the changes which everyone knows are necessary, we shall have to seriously consider leaving. Now that to me is plain common sense.
I've got less than a minute. Very quickly from you, Mr. Van Arsen. Do you think Britain can leave? And do you think, having listened to all this, it might be better for Europe if they did leave?
No, we would like that Britain joins the common market. Of course, everybody wants it, that Britain is member of the common market, and we need Britain for the political reasons, for these new problems facing our generation. Of course, nobody would understand that in Germany if Britain is leaving the common market.
Thank you very much indeed. No, thank you all very much indeed. What you have seen is a rehearsal, I think, of some of the arguments that will be dominating the newspapers, the television and the radio during June and during the direct elections. Thames Debate. Good night.